Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So, this is over a few weeks of audios that I've collated from Sky News, and I'm just going to put them in the order that I recorded them. So they might be slightly. I think one of them is out of order. I'm not sure it might be right, but yeah, a lot of things have happened. Chronologically, let's try and go in that order. The first, obviously, was the attack on a synagogue. Was it on Yom Kippur, and which is the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, by a man that I think he stabbed and killed one person, and he may have stabbed the second. I think he stabbed the second person, but the second person may have been shot by the Metropolitan Police when they were trying to. I think he might have been behind a door, but I'm not sure. I mean, and this is what I've heard, so I don't know whether this is true. This could be just cover up, behind the door, trying to stop this assailant, this terrorist, from getting inside the synagogue. And just another, because there was that case of the two ambassadors that were killed, the Jewish ambassadors that were killed right outside, was a Holocaust memorial. And there's a speech that we got towards the end from Tracy Ann Oberman talking about, as a Jew, her experiences and how, that this has been expected and warned about, but it seems like nothing's been done about it. Except them having their own security. But it's just another example of the hate that seems to be about in these days. And we're seeing a rise of this in not just anti-Semitism, but lots of different areas, against different peoples, like with refugees and this, that, and the other. There's a lot of hatred that is being allowed to flourish, and I don't really know why it is. I mean, I suppose you could say the rise of certain politicians like Nigel Farage or Donald J. Trump, in their rhetoric, in them not being so political as their predecessors, in the language that they use and how they talk about certain people and the things that they do, the nationalism side of things. Because I think the problem is sometimes that nationalism breeds this, well, it's sort of, it may light, maybe not intentionally, those people that have these very backward thoughts of humanity and wanting, only the people that are like them to be around them. That kind of mentality that we've seen throughout history. This is not a new thing. It goes back. I mean, maybe it's always been part of humanity. I don't know. It's so unfortunate, and just another proof of the way we live, the system that we live, the way, that we are as human beings is just failing. And I suspect a lot of that comes from education, how we educate each other, and how important it is for those people that are, their voices are amplified through the media, whatever media it is, or whether it's social media, or even whether it's doing speeches in the streets and thousands of people coming. The rhetoric that they use, if it's used irresponsibly, if it's the person who has a negative heart, say, is talking and then they influence people, that's the problem. I suppose the thing is, like, in a place where there's freedom of speech and freedom of thought, because as human beings we do all have that. It's just unfortunate, though, that, I mean, I don't know what it is that frames us to look at each other and look at each other different. Well, I suppose it is our system, because our system is about dividing us up into different countries, into different sections, boxes, this, that, and the other, which human beings seem to love to do. But the danger of that is that it maybe unwittingly creates that atmosphere of that, because you're put in that box, then you start to look at others and you think that, but like I always say, the intrinsic truth, the only intrinsic truth, or one of them, is that We're all human beings. And these other thoughts that we have, culture and all that kind of stuff, a lot of that is man-made and historical. But the actual truth is we're actually all human beings, all of us. And yet we will demonize or hate each other, or have these negative thoughts, or I know some of it is, bias that we may not even know we're doing because of the surroundings and etc. and TV and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's the crux of why human beings fall into this trap. But I don't know any way. The thing is, it's difficult to get out of it, because how do you turn everyone into having good hearts and realizing that, yeah, you're a human being. It doesn't matter what tag you've got, what tag you've been given, because we're born babies with nothing. I know I've gone about this many times, but yeah, this is like my understanding of it. But yeah, just to hear her thoughts of how, I didn't know this, that even in the UK, that synagogues and museums and schools of Jewish children, I assume that's like private schools, all have to have security. And I know, like, when I was a practicing Muslim, that the mosques, I know people did used to, stand outside on say, Jummah on Fridays. But maybe because remember that was during like 9/11 and all that kind of stuff. So there was a sort of Islamophobia around at that time. But yeah, I mean, that's just, imagine living like that in the UK. I mean, it's bad enough when you hear that, like in Israel, how they have to live with bunkers. I mean, that's what, great-great-grandfathers have to live during the Second World War. But this is in the 21st century that they have to have bunkers to go and live in, when an alarm goes off. Not like a natural disaster where it's like a, volcano erupted or something. But this is man-made things where you have to go and hide in bunkers. I mean, we know on October the 7th, people hid in their bunkers in the house, but the terrorists, Hamas, still got in and still dragged them off or murdered them and took them hostage. I mean, this is the 21st century that we're living in. But the thing is unfortunately, even, moderate people have all these thoughts in our heads that we, and, I know the Israeli government, as you're here, will accuse Sky and the BBC of being, their journalists or their stories being, Hamas-led. And, I mean, that's possible because I guess a lot of the information that they're getting is either from Israel or the Hamas-led government. And we know in war the first casualty is truth. But they're, like, in our minds we have all this. But yeah, that's to hear that from her. Then there's also from UN, there's some speech from the UN, which from the Palestinian president. And, his speech seems all great and everything. But it's the thing is, like, it's too late. To be, talking about peace and everyone working together. It's like, well, why wasn't this done 20 years ago, 5 years ago, to have these sentiments of peace and all living together and working together? That makes me doubt that, yeah, the heartful words are brilliant. But where's the action from this? This is the problem. The leaders we tend to have choices to elect, if we do have, tend to, I don't understand why they're not all. You'd think the people who want to lead people would be the best of people, with the big hearts. Anyway, so yeah, he get his speech. It's a great speech. I wish we lived in the world that he's talking about, but it just seems like, well, why was Hamas allowed to take over Gaza? Why didn't the Palestinian government do anything about getting rid of Hamas? If you had a terrorist organization, the world saying is, and you're just allowing it to flourish and doing whatever and causing problem for Palestinians, and you're meant to be a Palestinian government, I just don't understand why the logistics of that Gaza area had its own leadership. I don't know, maybe it's to do with some accord or etc. or act or legislation, I don't know. But and then there's Benjamin Netanyahu giving his speech with his boards and things, and his very attackive rhetoric that he gives. And then there's Donald Trump talking about his 20 peace plan that includes Tony Blair. I mean, I think, like, who else was the most decisive person you could pick to, I mean, if you didn't want a peace plan to work, to do with Muslims and to do with Palestine, I mean, other than if it was in Iraq or Afghanistan, but generally, the only two people I could possibly think of that you wouldn't pick is George W. Bush and Tony Blair. And they want to allow Tony Blair. And they think that Muslims will have forgotten Iraq and Afghanistan. And the fact is, you know, even if you don't take that, the fact is, as a prime minister of this country, I mean, I don't know whether it depends on which argument you fall of. Some people will say that he lied to us when he gave that weapons of mass destruction dossier credence and read it out to us about weapons coming 45 minutes. Everyone questioned 45 minutes. That seems very fast for, you know, Saddam Hussein's crumbling Iraq that had been seen several times by the UN, you know, as part of that checking resolution, to be able to do that. And yet he didn't think that, well, this seems like unrealistic. So whether it was whatever the reasoning on that, I know he's apologised, but I know he will say that he was probably given a dossier by experts and he just believed it. I mean, I don't know. I suppose that gets you off the hook. But the fact is his negligence on that basis, and the fact that, you know, the Iraq and Afghanistan war, they didn't really end up very well, and their after-day plan was non-existent, which I think no one sort of will discredit that. So why then, what credence does he have past, you know, wise to be involved in this? But just the name is so divisive. Even, you know, like me, I have a problem with him as someone who's in Britain, and I'm not the only one, you know. So I think that seems like a foolish person to put up, unless you just don't want this to work, and this is you know, I don't know if that's why his name is there, to sort of make it look like the other side don't want it. But it's like, that seems like to put him there and to hope they agree with it. I mean, I'd be surprised if they all agreed, but I don't know what influence he has, because he obviously has some influence to his name even being there, and apparently he's going there, or going to some meeting today. So yeah, there's that, and then there's about the ceasefire, which goes past, and about the hostages. They're meant to be coming tomorrow, all of them in one go, but then you've got Hamas. They've interviewed Hamas, and they're talking about, yes, they will give up government, but they won't give up weapons. And of course, that's part of Netanyahu's 5-point plan and part of Donald Trump's 20-point plan, which mirrors his 20-point plan. I thought actually mirrored quite a lot of what was at the president of Palestine's, because he lists some points of a plan, which I thought, oh, that seems like, or did he take a few out of that? So here's all those things. I don't know what your view is, but I suppose we'll see. I mean, I suppose the thing is that I know a lot of people are going on about Donald Trump and, you know, him wanting the Nobel Peace Prize, which he didn't get. And, yeah, I know I don't know if he's doing it for the genuine right reasons, but nevertheless, he has managed to pull this off. He's, you know, obviously a lot of people say that America does have this force, and why don't they use it? And this has been the case for many wars and generations. People have said this, but he's actually used it. So irrespective of that, I suppose you've got to ask, though, if this man is, like some people think, he's, you know, not that political, he's not that clever, well then, if he's able to do this, what has stopped all these so-called politicians of great standing that have gone past, of different countries, being unable to bring peace to this area? Is it that they didn't have the will that he has? And I mean, his will maybe because he wants to be lauded and get a peace prize and etc. But I don't know. But what's your view of this? Let's just hope it all comes. It'd be great if does have some peace, and that this is a positive thing and it triples around the world and we all start to see that we're all human beings. Let's stop all these stupid wars and fighting and start living our one existence in the best way we can with each other. Take care, take it easy, God bless and peace.
Right, let's take a closer look now at what the UK is proposing. Well, the government says a Palestinian state should be based on territory contained in what is known as the 1967 borders. Now, this would see a Palestinian state comprising Gaza and the West Bank, with Jerusalem as the capital shared with Israel. In Gaza, which is home to 2 million Palestinians, Israel is continuing its military campaign against Hamas in the wake of the 7th of October attacks in 2023. The West Bank, which is home to 3 million Palestinians, has been occupied by Israel since 1967. And since then, Israeli settlers have built homes within the West Bank and the East Jerusalem, with an estimated 700,000 Israeli settlers living there today. The UN says the settlements contravene international law. And Israel has also attracted criticism after confirming plans last month to expand the building of settlements into an area of the West Bank, which is known as E1. Opponents say that E1 would cut off the West Bank from East Jerusalem, and so ending hopes of a viable Palestinian state. Well, the UK's decision to formally recognize Palestine as a state has been met with backlash from Israel, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu describing the decision as absurd. Our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons reports.
On the ground in Gaza, it doesn't feel like anything has changed. Britain may now define this as part of the state of Palestine, but it's still a war zone. Battered by the Israeli military, much of it reduced to waste. Recognition won't stop the attacks here or bring back the dead. But the Palestinians believe that recognition will give them more diplomatic heft.
This also sends a very clear message of hope to the Palestinian people who are facing an existential threat. Israel always claims that we are under an existential threat. Today, it is the Palestinians who are under this existential threat, and we need to raise our voices on this threat.
On the West Bank, anger with Israel runs deep. This man's family were displaced in 1948, and he still wants to go back to his ancestral home. What do you think is Israel and what is Palestine?
In fact, we don't accept Israel. We don't recognize Israel. This is all Palestine. Sooner or later, it will be Palestine.
For Israel, it is these threats that bolster a sense of fear and defiance, convinced that recognition of Palestine will embolden Hamas.
I have a clear message to those leaders who recognise a Palestinian state after the terrible massacre of October 7th. You are giving a huge prize to terrorism. And I have another message for you. It will not happen. There will be no Palestinian state west of the Jordan. For years, I have prevented the establishment of this terrorist state in the face of enormous pressure both from home and abroad. We did it with determination, and we did it with political wisdom. Indeed, we doubled Jewish settlement in Judea and Samaria, and we will continue on this path.
Families of hostages have condemned the recognition, saying it threatens the lives of their loved ones. Even Netanyahu's political rivals echo his sentiments.
Well, I don't think the United Kingdom is in a place to give us conditions. Who does Starmer think he is?
Just as Britain confirmed its decision, so Israel sent more troops into the rubble of the Gaza Strip as part of its huge offensive. The power of diplomacy is being balanced against the might of military muscle. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Is that the UN?
Centuries. In the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Palestine, the extremist Israeli government continues to implement its settlement policies through illegal settlement expansion and developing projects for annexing settlements. The latest was the construction plan for E1, which would divide the West Bank into two parts and would isolate occupied Jerusalem from its surroundings and would undermine the option of the two-state solution in a blatant violation of international law and relevant Security Council resolutions, specifically Resolution 2334. Furthermore, the Israeli Prime Minister announced a plan for what he calls Greater Israel, which we reject and completely deplore, and which involves expanding into sovereign Arab states. In addition to the brutal attack against the sisterly state of Qatar, which we condemn and see as an escalation that is grave and a blatant violation of international law, which requires a decisive intervention and deterring procedures and measures for such expansionary plans. With official support and through increasing facilities, the terrorism of settlers increases. They burn homes and fields, they uproot trees and attack villages and attack unarmed Palestinian civilians. In fact, they kill them in broad daylight under the protection of the Israeli occupation army. Furthermore, the Islamic and Christian religious sites in Jerusalem, Hebron, and Gaza Strip have not been spared the attacks which have damaged the mosques, churches, and cemeteries in a blatant violation of the historic status quo and in a clear violation of the provisions of the international law. Despite all what our people have suffered, we reject what Hamas carried out on the 7th of October. These actions that targeted Israeli civilians and took them hostages, because these actions do not represent the Palestinian people, nor do they represent their just struggle for freedom and independence. We have affirmed, and we will continue to affirm, that the Gaza Strip is an integral part of the state of Palestine, and that we are ready to bear full responsibility for governance and security there. Hamas will not have a role to play in governance. Hamas and other factions will have to hand over their weapons to the Palestinian National Authority as part of a process to build the institutions of a one state, one law, and one legal security forces. We reiterate that we do not want an armed state. Ladies and gentlemen, our wounds are deep and our calamity is great. 7 million Palestinians are still living the tragedies of the Nakba and displacement since 1948. Our people in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and in the Gaza Strip, are still living the tragedies of the Israeli aggression and occupation for decades. Years that our people have spent under occupation, killing, arrests, and settlement, and the theft of money, property, and lands. And this still continues without any deterrent or accountability. Years of oppression, deprivation, and the protection for the occupier, and enabling the occupier instead of protecting the people under the occupation. And more violations of the rights of our Palestinian people to self-determination, to freedom, dignity, independence, and sovereignty on the land of the occupied state, on the land of the state of Palestine occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem. More than 1,000 resolutions at the United Nations, not one of them was implemented. There have been many efforts, many international initiatives, without reaching an end to this tragic situation that the Palestinian people are living under the yoke of occupation. In 1993, we signed the Oslo Accords, and we adhered to all its items, and we recognized the state of Israel. Israel, at the time, recognized the Palestine Liberation Organization as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. Based on that, we restructured our institutions, and we amended our national charter, and we rejected violence and terrorism, and we adopted a culture of peace. We made all our efforts to build the institutions of a modern Palestinian state that lives side by side in peace and security with Israel. But Israel did not adhere to the signed agreements and has worked systematically on undermining them. Ladies and gentlemen, just 3 days ago, we met at a high-level international conference in New York under the joint chairmanship of France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, with wide-scale international presence and united positions that expressed a genuine international will to put an end to this historic conflict by recognizing the state of Palestine, ending the occupation, and returning hope to both the Palestinian and Israeli people. And here I would like to, on behalf of the Palestinian people, to express our gratitude and appreciation to all the states that recently recognized the state of Palestine and those that intend to recognize the state of Palestine soon. We urge all the states that have not done so yet to recognize the state of Palestine. We call on supporting Palestine obtaining full membership in the United Nations. It should be noted that we have already recognized Israel's right to exist in 1988 and in 1993, and we still recognize this right. In this regard, we would like to thank France, the UK, Canada, Australia, Belgium, Portugal, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, San Marino, Andorra, and Denmark for their recognition of the state of Palestine. We would like to thank all 149 states which had previously recognized the state of Palestine. Our people will not forget this noble position. We would also like to commend the role of the chairmanship of this conference, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France, and also the United Kingdom. We would also like to thank all the states that headed the various working groups and those which participated and continue to participate in the International Alliance for Peace. We would also like to thank the states that are supporting our efforts to stop the genocide, end the occupation, and achieve peace. We highly appreciate all the peoples and organizations around the world who protested in support of the rights of the Palestinian people to freedom and independence and to stop the war, destruction, and starvation. We reject confusing the solidarity with the Palestinian cause and the issue of anti-Semitism, which is something that we reject based on our values and principles. Within the framework of welcoming the outcomes of the International Conference for Peace, we reiterate today before the General Assembly the following points. First, the need for an immediate and permanent end to the war in Gaza. Second, the entry without conditions of humanitarian aid through United Nations organizations, including the UNRWA, and to stop using starvation as a weapon. And here we would like to thank the brotherly and friendly states and organizations that have been sending aid. Third, the release of all hostages and prisoners on both sides. Fourth, the complete withdrawal of the occupation from the Gaza Strip and the rejection of the plans for displacement and putting an end to settlement, the terrorism of settlers, and the theft of Palestinian lands and property under the headline of annexation, and stopping the aggression against the status quo in holy sites. These are all unilateral actions that undermine the two-state solution in Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem. Fifth, the state of Palestine should take their full responsibility, starting with the Administrative Committee for the Gaza Strip, which is chaired by a minister in the Palestinian government, to manage the affairs of the Gaza Strip for a temporary period, and then to connect that with the West Bank, all through Arab and international support, and with Arab and international presence to protect civilians in Gaza and support the Palestinian forces under the umbrella of the United Nations, rather than being a replacement. Sixth, to guarantee that the residents of the Gaza Strip remain on their lands without displacement, and to implement a recovery and reconstruction plan in both the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Seventh, releasing the Palestinian tax money that is being held by the State of Israel unjustly, and lifting the economic siege and the barriers from the Palestinian cities, villages, and refugee camps. Eighth, supporting our national efforts towards reform and conducting presidential and parliamentary elections within a year after the end of the war. The practical procedures has begun. A committee has been assigned to draft a temporary constitution, and it will end its work within 3 months, so that we move from authority to state. We want a modern and democratic state that abides by international law, the rule of law, and multilateralism, and the peaceful transition of power. And we are extremely keen to empower women and the youth. Ninth, we declare that we are ready to work with US President Donald Trump and with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France, the United Nations, and all partners to implement the peace plan that was approved in the conference that was held on the 22nd of September, in a way that would lead towards a just peace and regional cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, today we say clearly, peace cannot be achieved if justice is not achieved, and there can be no justice if Palestine is not freed. We want to live in freedom, security, and peace like all other people on earth, in an independent, sovereign state on the borders of 1967, with East Jerusalem as our capital, in security and peace with our neighbors. We want a modern civilian state that is free of violence, weapons, and extremism, one that respects law, human rights, and invests in people, development, technology, and education, not in wars and conflict. The time has come for the international community to do right by the Palestinian people, so that they may obtain their legitimate right to be rid of the occupation and to not remain a hostage to the temperament of Israeli politics, which denies our rights and continue in their injustice, oppression, and aggression. We are continuing to move forward, and we will continue our peaceful, legal, and diplomatic fight to obtain our rights. In conclusion, we say to our sons and daughters in the homeland, in the exile, and in the diaspora, no matter how much our wounds bleed, and no matter how long this suffering lasts, it will not break our will to live and survive. The dawn of freedom will emerge, and the flag of Palestine will fly high in our skies as a symbol of dignity, steadfastness, and being free from the yoke of occupation. Palestine is ours. Jerusalem is the jewel of our heart and our eternal capital. We will not leave our homeland. We will not leave our lands. Our people will remain rooted like the olive trees, firm as the rocks. We will rise from under the rubble to rebuild and to send from our blessed and holy land the messages of hope and the sound of truth and right, and build the bridges of just peace for the people of our region and the entire world. May the peace and mercy and blessings of God be upon you.
That was the breaking developments of Mahmoud Abbas addressing the United Nations General Assembly. He was doing so from the presidential palace in Ramallah in the West Bank. That is the audience signalling their applause in the UNGA in New York. He wasn't allowed to travel to New York by the Trump administration, and no delegates from the Palestinian authorities were given visas to travel aside from those already in New York. Let's bring in our correspondents. Firstly, our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons is in Jerusalem, and also our US correspondent Mark Stone, who joins us as well. Adam, first to you, your reaction to what we've just been hearing.
Yeah, I think Mahmoud Abbas was continuing in a sense from where he left off a couple of days ago. This was a speech, in a sense, on the one hand, conciliatory, saying that he wanted there to be a state of Palestine that could coexist with the state of Israel. He went to pains to say that the Palestinians had accepted the right of Israel to exist. He said he'd done that in 1988 and then again in 1993. He said that anti-Semitism was rejected by him. He said it was against the values of Palestine. But he was also, at the same time, hugely critical, as you would imagine, of the conduct of Israel. He described the war in Gaza as a genocide, as destructive, as having cost the lives of so many women and children, as well, of course, of men in Gaza. Said that the number of dead and injured was well above 200,000. There are those who actually think that that is an underestimate. And he thanked the nations who had come out to recognise the state of Palestine, not least the UK, as well as France, Canada, Australia. He listed all of them, including the much smaller nations, and called on those who have not yet recognised the state of Palestine to do so. And then pointedly, I thought, made a point of saying that he looked forward to working with President Donald Trump, as well as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, very respectful in those terms, France, and any other partners at the United Nations, to pursue a path to peace. And then right at the end, you heard Mahmoud Abbas laying out this vision of Palestine and Gaza, and talking about reconstructing and rebuilding these countries, not around war, but around technology and peace. So this was a powerful speech. As I said, it was a conciliatory one, but I think a few things that you look around it. Number one, He was delivering the speech from Ramallah, not from New York, because the United States declined to give him a visa. There's no way you could look at that as anything other than a snub. Israel continues to believe that the fact that countries have recognized the state of Palestine is, in their repeated expression, a reward for terrorism. The fact that Mahmoud Abbas said yet again...
Well, I finished there for some reason. I don't know if this was the same conference, but it's Benjamin Netanyahu.
Our brave heroes. This is Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking to you live from the United Nations. We have not forgotten you, not even for a second. The people of Israel are with you. We will not falter and we will not rest until we bring all of you home. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to special efforts by Israeli intelligence, my words are now also being carried. They're streamed live to the cell phones of Gazans. So to the remaining Hamas leaders and to the jailers of our hostages, I now say, lay down your arms. Let my people go. Free the hostages, all of them, the whole 48. Free the hostages now. If you do, you will live. If you don't, Israel will hunt you down. Ladies and gentlemen, if Hamas agrees to our demands, the war could end right now. Gaza would be demilitarized, Israel would retain overriding security control, and a peaceful civilian authority would be established by Gazans and others committed to peace with Israel. And of course, you understand that the war in Gaza has affected every Israeli. But I'm sure there are people in New York or in London or in Melbourne and elsewhere who are probably thinking, what does all of this have to do with me? And the answer is everything. Because our enemies are your enemies. So let's do something else. So first at the UN, let's do a pop quiz. And raise your hand if you know the answer. Here's the first question. Who shouts death to America? Is it A, Iran, B, Hamas, C, Hezbollah, D, the Houthis, or E, all of the above? All of the above. Correct, all of the above. Second question. Who has murdered Americans and Europeans in cold blood? Is it A, Al-Qaeda, B, Hamas, C, Hezbollah, D, Iran, or E, all of the above? Correct. Again. So here's the point I wanted to make. Our enemies hate all of us with equal venom. They want to drag the modern world back to the past, to a dark age of violence, fanaticism, and terror. I think many of you are already feeling in your own societies the radical Islamist surge. You know, I'm sure you do, you know deep down that Israel is fighting your fight. So I want to tell you a secret. Behind closed doors, many of the leaders who publicly condemn us privately thank us. They tell me how much they value Israel's superb intelligence services that have prevented time and again terrorist attacks in their capitals, time and again saving countless lives. General George Keegan, former head of U.S. Air Force Intelligence, once said, if the United States had to gather on its own the intelligence that Israel gives us, we would have to establish 5 CIAs. 5 CIAs. This past June, when Israel struck Iran's nuclear facilities, German Chancellor Merz admitted the truth. He said, Israel is doing the dirty work for all of us. President Trump understands better than any other leader that Israel and America face a common threat. He showed the world that when Iran and its proxies murder Americans, take Americans hostage, shout death to America, burn American flags, and try to assassinate the President of the United States, not once, but twice. He showed them there is a price to pay for all that. But regrettably, many leaders who are represented in this hall, they send a very different message. Sure, in the days immediately following October 7th, many of them supported Israel. But that support quickly evaporated when Israel did what any self-respecting nation would do in the wake of such a savage attack. We fought back. Now just imagine, just sit back for a second and imagine
Collective punishment.
an attack against America proportioned to the attack against Israel on October 7th. Imagine a regime, a terror regime, dispatching thousands of terrorists to invade the United States. They massacre 40,000 Americans. They take 10,000 Americans hostage. What do you think America would do?
He's doing his numbers business.
You think America would leave that regime standing? You don't think that.
Depends who's in power.
No way, not a chance. The United States would wipe out that terror regime and ensure that such savagery would never threaten America again. This is precisely what Israel is doing in Gaza. We're wiping out the terror regime of Hamas and ensuring that this savagery will never threaten Israel again. That's what we are doing. That's what any self-respecting government would do.
No one's got a problem with you getting rid of Hamas. It's that are you just getting rid of Hamas?
Yet, and it's a yet that I'm sorry to say here, yet over time, many world leaders buckled. They buckled under the pressure of a biased media, radical Islamist constituencies, and anti-Semitic mobs. There's a familiar saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Well, for many countries here, when the going got tough, you caved. And here's the shameful result of that collapse. For much of the past 2 years, Israel has had to fight a seven-front war against barbarism with many of your nations opposing us. Astoundingly, as we fight the terrorists who murdered many of your citizens, you are fighting us. You condemn us, you embargo us, and you wage political and legal warfare, it's called lawfare, against us. I say to the representatives of those nations, this is not an indictment of Israel. It's an indictment of you. It's an indictment of weak-kneed leaders who appease evil rather than support a nation whose brave soldiers guard you from the barbarians at the gate. They're already penetrating your gates. When will you learn? You can't appease your way out of jihad, and you won't escape the Islamist storm by sacrificing Israel. To overcome that storm, you have to stand with Israel. But that's not what you're doing. As the prophets of Israel foretold in the Bible, you've turned good into evil and evil into good. Now I want to drill down on this. Take the false charge of genocide. Israel is accused of deliberately targeting civilians. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposite is true. The head of urban warfare studies, Colonel John Spencer, he's perhaps the world's greatest expert on urban warfare. And he says, Israel is applying more measures to minimize civilian casualties than any military in history. And because we're doing that, the ratio of non-combatant to combatant casualties is less than 2 to 1 in Gaza. That's an astoundingly low ratio, lower than NATO's wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, especially when you consider that Gaza is one of the most densely populated urban areas on Earth. It has hundreds of miles of terror tunnels underground,
2 terrorists, 1 civilian.
and it has countless terror towers above ground, and thousands of terrorists embedded in the tunnels and in these towers in civilian areas. If you want to see what measures Israel takes to avoid civilian casualties in this war, just look at what we're doing now in Gaza City, the last Hamas stronghold, one of the 2 last strongholds. For 3 weeks, Israel dropped millions of leaflets, sent millions of text messages, and made countless phone calls urging civilians to leave Gaza City before our military moves in. At the same time, Hamas implants itself in mosques, schools, hospitals, apartment buildings, and tries to force those civilians not to leave, to stay in harm's way. And it often threatens them at gunpoint if they try to do so. For Israel, every civilian casualty is a tragedy. For Hamas, it's a strategy. Hamas uses civilians as human shields and as props in its sick propaganda war in Israel, against Israel, a propaganda war that the Western media buys hook, line, and sinker. Now, despite Hamas's threats, close to 700,000 Gazans, almost 750,000, have already heeded our calls and moved to safe zones.
Is that displacement?
Now I want to ask you a simple question, a simple, logical question. Would a country committing genocide plead with the civilian population it is supposedly targeting to get out of harm's way? Would we tell them, get out, if we want to commit genocide? We're trying to get them out. And Hamas is trying to keep them in. And this charge is so baseless.
Yeah, well, like
The comparison to genocide, wholesale slaughter of populations.
I'm not sure anyone's saying it's intentional.
What, did the Nazis ask the Jews to leave, kindly leave, go out? Did others, you want me to name all the genocidal
That's a good point it's making.
leaders of history? Just go one by one. Did anyone do this? Did they say, get out so we can come in? Of course not. So the truth has been turned on its head. Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization whose charter calls for the murder of all Jews on the planet. This genocidal organization is given a pass. It's barely mentioned.
Well, I think that's
While Israel, which does everything it can to get civilians out of harm's way, Israel is put in the dock. What a joke. You want to hear another one? Israel is accused of deliberately starving the people of Gaza when Israel is deliberately feeding the people of Gaza. Since the beginning of the war, Israel has let into Gaza more than 2 million tons of food and aid. That's 1 ton of aid for every man, woman, and child in Gaza.
This is where it gets complicated.
Nearly 3,000 calories per person per day.
Organizations claim it's not this.
Some starvation policy. If there are Gazans who don't have enough food, it's because Hamas is stealing it. Hamas steals it, hoards it, and sells it at exorbitant prices to fight its war machine. Last month, even the UN, not exactly a supporter of Israel. You're supposed to laugh, by the way.
Inappropriate.
Last month, even the UN admitted that Hamas and other armed groups looted 85% of the trucks. That's why you have deprivation. Those who peddled the blood libels of genocide and starvation against Israel are no better than those who peddled blood libels against the Jews in the Middle Ages when they falsely accused us of poisoning wells, spreading plague, and using the blood of children to bake Passover matzahs. Anti-Semitism dies hard. In fact, it doesn't die at all. It just keeps coming back with its libelous lies, refurbished, regurgitated over and over again. And I want to tell you something else. These anti-Semitic lies, they have consequences. In recent months, Jews have been assaulted in Canada, Austria, or rather Australia, Britain, France, the Netherlands, and elsewhere. Here in America, an elderly Holocaust survivor was burned to death in Colorado. And a beautiful young couple from the Israeli embassy in Washington was brutally gunned down right in front of the Holocaust Museum there. Thankfully, President Trump's administration is forcefully fighting the scourge of anti-Semitism, and every government here should follow its lead. But instead, many do the opposite. They actually reward the worst anti-Semites on earth. This week, the leaders of France, Britain, Australia, Canada, and other countries unconditionally recognized a Palestinian state. They did so after the horrors committed by Hamas on October 7th. Horrors praised on that day by nearly 90% of the Palestinian population. And let me say that again. Nearly 90% of Palestinians supported the attack on October 7th.
Really? That many?
It's not supported only. They celebrated it. They danced on the rooftops. They threw candies.
They must have a good
That's both in Gaza and in Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, as you call it.
When they have this hyperbole.
And it's just the way they celebrated another horror,
I'm not saying
9/11.
I know.
They danced on the rooftops.
90%?
They cheered. They threw candy. You know what message the leaders who recognize the Palestinian state this week sent to the Palestinians? It's a very clear message. Murdering Jews pays off. Well, I have a message for these leaders. When the most savage terrorists on earth are effusively praising your decision, you didn't do something right. You did something wrong, horribly wrong. Your disgraceful decision will encourage terrorism against Jews and against innocent people everywhere. It will be a mark of shame on all of you. But wait a minute, Mr. Prime Minister, they tell me. Wait a minute. We believe in a two-state solution where the Jewish state of Israel will live side by side in peace with the Palestinian state. There's only one problem with that. The Palestinians, they don't believe in this solution. They never have. They don't want a state next to Israel. They want a Palestinian state instead of Israel. And that's why every time they were offered a Palestinian state, but were required to end the conflict with Israel and recognize the Jewish state, every time, over the decades, they turned it down. And that is why every time they were given territory, they used it to attack us. In fact, they effectively had a Palestinian state in Gaza. So what did they do with that state? Peace? Coexistence? No. They attacked us time and time again. Totally unprovoked. They fired rockets into our cities. They murdered our children. They turned Gaza into a terror base from which they committed the October 7th massacre. So here's the uncomfortable truth. The persistent Palestinian rejection of a Jewish state in any boundary is what has driven this conflict for over a century. It is still driving it. It's not the absence of a Palestinian state. It's the presence and existence of a Jewish state. And I find it amazing that the foreign chancelleries and the ministries and all those who pontificate about this, and the leaders, how can they not see this basic truth when it is repeated again and again and again ad nauseum? And I want to say something else. This rejection of a Jewish state not only applies to Hamas, it also applies to the so-called moderate Palestinian Authority. You should know that the Palestinian authorities pays terrorists to slay Jews. The more Jews the terrorists slay, the more the Palestinian Authority pays. The Palestinian Authority names its government buildings, its public squares, its schools after the mass murderers of Jews, which they glorify as martyrs. They pay and glorify not just the killer of Jews, but also killers of Christians. Christians like Taylor Force, an American veteran who was brutally murdered in Israel by Palestinian terrorists. But, that I hear from the Western leaders. They tell me, the PA promised us it will reform. And I know this time, Prime Minister, it will be different. Yeah, right. We've heard these promises for decades. They always promise. They never deliver. Because you see, the Palestinian Authority is corrupt to the core. They haven't held elections in 20 years. They use the same textbooks as Hamas, exactly the same textbooks. They teach their children to hate Jews and destroy the Jewish state. And Christians don't fare much better. When Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus, was under Israeli control, 80% of its residents were Christians. But since the PA took control, that number has dwindled to under 20%. These are the people you want to give a state to? What you're doing is giving the ultimate reward to intolerant fanatics who perpetrated and supported the October 7th massacre. Giving the Palestinians a state 1 mile from Jerusalem after October 7th is like giving Al-Qaeda a state 1 mile from New York City after September 11th. This is sheer madness. It's insane, and we won't do it. So here's another message to those Western leaders. Israel will not allow you to shove a terrorist state down our throats. We will not commit national suicide because you don't have the guts to face down a hostile media and anti-Semitic mobs demanding Israel's blood. And I want you to grasp something else, which is also distorted in the media. I say this not only in my name or the name of my government, but on behalf of all the people of Israel. Last year, there was a vote in the Knesset, our parliament, whether or not to oppose the imposition of a Palestinian state. You want to guess what the results were? Out of 120 members of our parliament, 99 voted against and only 9 supported. That's over 90%. It's not a fringe group. It's not the prime minister who himself is extreme or he's held hostage by extreme parties to his right. It's over 90% of Israelis. My opposition to a Palestinian state is not simply my policies or my government's policy. It's the policy of the state and people of the state of Israel. Western leaders may have buckled under the pressure. And I guarantee you one thing, Israel won't. Israel's victories over the Iranian... Thank you, I know you won't too, that's good. Israel's victories over the Iranian terror axis have opened up possibilities for peace that were unthinkable 2 years ago. Take Syria. For decades, the very idea of peace between Israel and Syria seemed unimaginable. Well, no more. Today, we have begun serious negotiations with the new Syrian government. I believe an agreement can be reached that respects Syria's sovereignty and protects both Israeli security and the security of the minorities in the region, including the Druze minority. From the founding of Israel, Jews and Druze have been brothers in arms. We have fought together, We've bled together. We built our lives together. When I was a young commander in Israel's Special Forces, my own life was saved by the invaluable advice given to me by a great friend, Salim Shufi, a heroic Druze IDF veteran. And that's why I couldn't sit idly by, nor could Israel sit idly by, while the Druze were being slaughtered by jihadists. And I instructed our forces to stop the massacre, which they promptly did. Peace between Israel and Lebanon is possible as well. I call on the Lebanese government to also begin direct negotiations with Israel. I commend it for its declared aim to disarm Hezbollah. But we need more than words. If Lebanon takes genuine and sustained action to disarm Hezbollah, I'm sure we can achieve a sustainable peace. Of course, until that happens, we will take whatever action we need to defend ourselves and to maintain the conditions of the ceasefire which was established in Lebanon. Our goal is not merely to monitor Hezbollah's actions, but to prevent them from violating the ceasefire and attacking us at any time. But I'm sure that if the Lebanese government persists in its goal of disarming Hezbollah, peace will come very speedily and very readily. Victory over Hezbollah has made peace possible with our two Arab neighbors in the north. Victory over Hamas will make peace possible with nations throughout the Arab and Muslim world. Our victory would lead to a dramatic extension and expansion of the historic Abraham Accords, which President Trump brokered between Arab leaders and myself 5 years ago. And I took note, as I'm sure you did too, of the encouraging words spoken here by the President of Indonesia. This is the country with the largest Muslim population of all nations. And it's also a sign of what could come. Forward-looking Arabs and Muslim leaders know that cooperating with Israel will provide them with groundbreaking Israeli technologies, including in medicine and science, in agriculture and water, in defense and AI, and so many other fields. I believe that in the coming years, the Middle East will look dramatically different. Many of those who wage war on Israel today will be gone tomorrow. Brave peacemakers will take their place. And nowhere will this be more true than in Iran. The long-suffering Iranian people will regain their freedom. They will make Iran great again. And our two ancient peoples, the people of Israel and the people of Iran, will restore a friendship that will benefit the entire world. Ladies and gentlemen, the horrors that happened on one dark day, October 7th, those horrors happened countless times during the centuries of my people's exiles among the nations. Jewish blood was cheap. Jews were killed with impunity. We had to beg others to defend us. The rise of Israel did not mean that the attempts to destroy us would end. It meant that we could fight back against those attempts. And that is exactly what Israel has done since October 7th. Our sons and daughters fought like lions. Our brave soldiers donned their uniforms and rushed into battle. They were armed with the dreams of the 100 generations of Jews who came before them. The dream of living as a free people in the land of Israel, our beloved homeland for more than 3,000 years. The dreams of living in our own independent state. The dream of having an army to defend ourselves. And the dream of being a light unto the nations, a beacon of progress, ingenuity, innovation, for the benefit of all humanity. On October 7th, the enemies of Israel tried to extinguish that light. 2 years later, the resolve of Israel and the strength of Israel burn brighter than ever. With God's help, that strength and that resolve would lead us to a speedy victory and to a brilliant future of prosperity and peace. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the State of Israel.
You were listening there to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in that typically fiery speech. He often gives these sorts of speeches where he uses props and maps to give a visual experience to the audience. You'll see and remember at the very beginning of that lengthy speech, the diplomats walking out in a staged walkout that was planned. We knew it would happen, but the hall more or less became empty, and the cheers and the standing ovation that you saw were coming from his team, knowing that that would take place to try and counter the mass walkouts that you saw. It's Friday here at the UN General Assembly in New York, a quieter day, but a very significant speech given by the Israeli Prime Minister, where he attacked his allies and his enemies. He talked about the fact that countries like Australia, Britain, France, Canada, recognizing the state of Palestine at the beginning of the week was a gift to Hamas. He described it as recognizing a state for Al-Qaeda just a few miles away from New York City just after September 11. These are the sorts of speeches and the language that Benjamin Netanyahu has become known for, and certainly what he has been giving for the last 2 years. He dismissed claims of genocide. It was a UN commission that has accused Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. He said, we would never commit genocide. He dismissed claims of famine, saying we are feeding the people of Gaza. He said that we are dropping leaflets. We are warning people to move away from the fighting areas where they are trying to launch an offensive against Hamas, a new onslaught against what they say is only against Hamas and not civilians, that they're telling civilians to walk. But it is that movement of people, moving families and Gazans from place to place, from the so-called safe zones, which is what has come under such criticism by the international community. Let's bring in our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn. Dom, these are the sorts of speeches we're used to Benjamin Netanyahu giving. We're used to seeing these sorts of walkouts, but increasingly, this is a man, this is a nation that has become isolated. His staunchest allies have now told him enough. The US president has told him enough. In the 12 months since his last speech, so much has changed for the Israeli government and this Israeli leader.
Yeah, but that wasn't the picture he was trying to paint. He started by holding up that map of the Middle East under the heading The Curse that he showed last year, that showed the curse of Hamas in Gaza, of Hezbollah in Lebanon, of the curse of the Alawite regime, the Assad regime in Syria, the Iranians, and also the Houthis in Yemen. And then he used this black Sharpie, didn't he, to cross them all out, saying they've all been dealt with. He said they've been crippled and destroyed. So a kind of triumphant Netanyahu at the beginning there, and then a kind of defensive one later when he went into what's happening in Gaza and protesting at the characterization of Israel's campaign in Gaza as genocidal. As you say, defiantly refuting the claim that the Israelis are responsible for starvation, and actually saying those claims are in line with centuries-old anti-Semitism. You know, that will, I think, infuriate people who see Netanyahu as kind of trivializing the whole idea, the allegations of anti-Semitism by what he says about Gaza. And then he went on to sort of defend the rest of his record. I think it's interesting to think about the audience, isn't it? Because, you know, the audience in the hall largely left the hall. I mean, he didn't read the room in terms of global opinion. As you say, Israel is becoming more and more of an international pariah. It's not been able to translate that military victory into diplomatic victory at all. It's become more and more ostracized. So the hall kind of, did to a large extent empty. We see exoduses from UN General Assembly halls. We've seen that in the past with Israeli prime ministers, but nothing quite, I think, on the scale that we saw today. He created an audience in Gaza by instructing his military and governments to set up massive speakers to broadcast it across the border, and you have to say, it won't be heard in Gaza City because the IDF is involved in a pulverizing mission there, huge amounts of artillery that will drown out any speakers from the border. But also it seems like the Israeli intelligence services have hijacked the phones of Gazans to broadcast this message as well. But, I think that's all performative. Really, the audience was one man, and that's one man sitting in a very different room from the hall here, and that's Donald Trump in the Oval Office. Because, as you say, on the eve of this, Donald Trump has come out and said something no American president has said before in this sort of context. He said he's just not going to allow Israel to annex the West Bank. Normally, American presidents are kind of ambiguous about this. They don't come out and say flatly they're not going to let an Israeli prime minister do anything. And for Trump to do that, I think is a pretty clear warning to Netanyahu that time is running out over the campaign in Gaza. He feels his Abraham Accords, the fundamental achievement of his first term in office, are in peril. That's what he was told by Arab leaders yesterday and the leaders of other Muslim-majority nations because of what's happening in Gaza. And he's going to put Netanyahu under enormous pressure in the days ahead when Netanyahu goes to the Oval Office in Washington to, wind it up. But there was no sign at all of that, was there, from Netanyahu in his speech. Absolutely defiant and determined to carry on until this goal of total victory, which his own generals have really told him is not that feasible.
Absolutely, Dom. And I think one of the things when I've spoken to Arab leaders over the course of the last couple of days is they've issued this. No one threatens Donald Trump, but they have issued a warning that annexation of the West Bank is a red line for them, and that the Abraham Accords is on the table, that this could all blow up in Donald Trump's face. They haven't done it as explicitly as that, but they have, I think, for the first time, made it clear to Donald Trump what's on the line here. And they've told me that it has felt clear to Donald Trump for the first time in the last 8 months that there is so much riding on this moment. They're all holding their breath in this moment because they fear that between Friday and Monday is a long time when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu. He's described as the magician for a reason. He knows how to weave and sell a message and tell a story, convince Congress. Often people have described him to me in the past as someone who thinks he's the leader of the Republican Party. He speaks to the Republicans in a way as though he's leading them. He speaks to Donald Trump in a sort of way where he praises him. He knows how to work him. So between Friday and Monday is going to be a testing time for the Arab world, for the Muslim world, for the international community.
Absolutely. And he's someone who is brilliant at pushing it right to the limit. And he's done that with lots of other American presidents in the past. As you say, he's kind of wriggled out of the pressure that they put him under. And, they made it very clear from Clinton to Obama to Biden that they don't like him, they don't like his tactics, they don't like what he does to them. But he's always used his power, as you say, more broadly across the pro-Israeli constituency in America to get his way. But he's under enormous pressure because of exactly how those Arab leaders that your soundings and mine also confirm are now saying to the White House, this deal that you got, really the signature foreign policy deal of your first term in office is going to fall apart. And it's certainly not going to expand any further if the Gaza campaign goes on much more, if tens of thousands or more of our Arab brothers and sisters die, and if there's any further talk of annexation in the West Bank, that's going to really jeopardize the Abraham Accords, which were the normalization process between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain. And the thing about Netanyahu is his pitch always to the Israelis is that he has a direct line. He has to Downish and also to the White House. He has this ability to pick up the phone and say, I need to come and talk to you. And he always gets an audience. And for Israelis, having lived there for 5 years, that they have an acute sense that they're in a small country in a very dangerous neighborhood. And this is the one leader who can guarantee he can get their voice heard in Washington. The problem for Netanyahu, of course, now is that he's increasingly ostracized, and his military successes have not been mirrored by his diplomatic successes, quite the opposite, and that is now in danger. So this is absolutely crucial weekend for Netanyahu. Is he going to be able to show he can maintain that influence in the White House, or as the signs seem to be, he's under a huge amount of pressure to now give in and to bring this Gaza war to an end? He fundamentally seems to believe that victory against Hamas, total victory, is achievable. But as I say, most of his commanders seem to say it's not entirely achievable, not total victory. So
the synagogue was full of worshippers on this, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The terrorist was prevented from getting inside, but by then he'd killed 2 and injured 4 others. This is how the horror unfolded. The first emergency call was made at 9:31. A man had been stabbed and a car driven towards people at Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue in Crumpsall. 3 minutes later, firearms officers were sent to Middleton Road as police received more reports that a security guard had been attacked with a knife. When police arrived, there was a car close to the front gates of the synagogue with a victim on the road. At 9:38, outside the building, officers confronted the attacker before they opened fire and killed him. At 1 p.m, a police cordon was put up on White House Avenue, less than half a mile from the synagogue. Witnesses say 2 men were led away in handcuffs. Police will be delving into every aspect of the killer's life, his family, his friends, his acquaintances, and examining in minute detail any mobile phones and computers. They'll want to know everybody he's been in contact with. Did others help him plan the attack, or was he a lone wolf? Police said later they knew the killer's identity, but they weren't ready to reveal it publicly.
There were a large number of worshippers attending the synagogue at the time of this attack, but thanks to the immediate bravery of security staff and the worshippers inside, as well as the fast response of the police, the attacker was prevented from gaining access.
The Home Secretary met some of the officers involved in the response to the attack, and she had a message for terrorists.
To those who seek to divide us, they will fail.
As night fell, the police operation was widening beyond the city.
Good evening. Earlier today, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day for the Jewish community, a vile individual committed a terrorist attack that attacked Jews because they are Jews, and attacked Britain because of our values. So many Jewish families first came to this country as a place of refuge, fleeing the greatest evil ever inflicted on a people. And Britain welcomed them. Communities like the one attacked in Manchester provided safety, but also the security that comes from a promise that this is a country that stands up to hatred, and that we don't just provide refuge, we provide a home. For so many Jewish families, that is the story of Britain. But Britain is also a country where Jewish buildings, synagogues, even schools require round-the-clock protection, where dedicated specialist security is necessary because of the daily threat of anti-Semitic hatred. Today's horrific incident shows why. And while this is not a new hate, this is something Jews have always lived with, we must be clear. It is a hatred that is rising once again, and Britain must defeat it once again. On behalf of the nation, I want to offer my condolences to the families and victims affected. I want to thank the Greater Manchester Police, the first responders, and those dedicated security specialists. There is no doubt whatsoever that they have prevented an even greater tragedy, and we thank them for their bravery. But to every Jewish person in this country, I also want to say this. I know how much fear you will be holding inside of you. I really do. And so, on behalf of our country, I express my solidarity, but also my sadness that you still have to live with these fears. Nobody should have to do that.
Well, in a country or government,
nobody.
A little bit responsible, no?
And so I promise you that I will do everything in my power to guarantee you the security that you deserve, starting with a more visible police presence protecting your community. I promise you that over the coming days, you will see the other Britain, the Britain of compassion, of decency, of love. And I promise you that this Britain will come together to wrap our arms around your community and show you that Britain is a place where you and your family are safe, secure, and belong. Thank you.
Tracy Ann Oberman is a familiar face to millions of us. She's played popular roles like Chrissy Watts in EastEnders and appeared in Doctor Who. She's also a renowned West End stage actress, and she is Jewish. And because of that, she's faced death threats after calling out anti-Semitism she's seen online. After the terror attack on a synagogue in Manchester, we asked her to join us on the programme again this morning, and I'm delighted to say I can speak to her now. Good morning, Tracy Ann.
Hi, Trevor. Lovely to see you. I'm sorry I'm not with you in the studio, but I am filming.
Yeah. Tracy Ann, let's just start with Thursday. How and when did you find out what had happened?
I had been, Yom Kippur is the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. Even Jews who are the most non-observant, it's in their DNA. It's a really reverential and important day. I'd been in synagogue in the morning, and then I was working, I was rehearsing, and then I was filming. Unfortunately, I got back in the, I found out in the day, I got a message on my phone from actually a friend of mine whose family go to that synagogue and whose brother watched it unfold live from the window. They live over the road, and it's shocking, really shocking. And, Trevor, I'm not a journalist, I'm not a politician, it isn't my job, but I speak on behalf of the community that I'm very close to and that I love, to say that we are frightened, we are deeply traumatized by what happened, and we are beginning to feel very angry because we have been saying for the past 2 years that this was not just a possibility. It wasn't a case of if it was going to happen, it was a case of when it was going to happen. And we have told this government before this one and the government that are in charge now that we have been intimidated and frightened by relentless anti-Semitism for 2 years. Growing up as a Jew in this country, and it's been completely normalized all of my life, is that every synagogue, every Jewish school, every Jewish arts center that you go into, any Jewish event, you have had to have security, lots of security, because of the continuing death threats. So that is normalized. But the last 2 years has seen it go up to a whole other level. We've had repeated marches, week after week, with slogans and chants and placards that have left our community feeling intimidated and feeling threatened. We have been gaslit. We have been told that our fear is totally unjustified, that when we hear slogans that make us, that we know as a dog whistle is a call for death to Jews, we've been told that that isn't true. And it's rife in the National Health Service. It's rife within our broadcasters. I have to say, anti-Semitism has become so normalized, Trevor, that we have a national broadcaster that even, Tim Davie himself had to admit that an anti-Semitic chant, which he has called it, went out live on a BBC broadcast from Glastonbury that stayed up for 5 hours, that the BBC have apologised, but that is how bad it's got.
This was the Bob Villan.
incident?
Yes, amongst many others, and there has to be. We are very appreciative of Ms. Mahmood, and we're streeting within the National Health Service, and indeed Keir Starmer. But the words are now meaning nothing. Action has to be taken. One strike, and you're out across the board. One would hope. And our children are frightened of going to school. I have to work now at a theatre where, as a high-profile Jewish actress, I have to have security constantly.
Tracy-Ann, how do you respond to people who say, all of this may be true, but one of the reasons that you and I live in this country is because of people's right to express their views, even if they are disagreeable or unpleasant?
Not when they're breaking the law.
Trevor, that's absolutely correct. Of course, free speech is everything, but there gets to a point where free speech and intimidation and incitement, which goes against the law, has to be tackled. And we have seen the end game of allowing unchecked extremism and unchecked rhetoric. We've seen it. It was devastating what happened the other day. Really devastating. We've lived as a community for many years here. We have contributed to this country and to this society. We have had to pay for our own security, the CST, which does the most incredible job. But we have begun to lose faith in the authorities. We've begun to lose faith in our state broadcaster. We've begun to lose faith in our politicians. We need to feel safe, and I don't know what the future for the Jewish community is going to be in this country unless it is tackled.
To be fair, I should say, Tim Davie did say that he deeply regretted the incident that you mentioned. But obviously, this is something deeply felt by you and others in the Jewish community, as well as some outside it. But the production of Merchant of Venice that you've been touring, which I've seen, fantastic show, it harks back a century or so to the experience of Jews in the East End. Some say that they're feeling echoes of that period. Does that make sense to you?
It makes total sense. The irony is the Battle of Cable Street, the anniversary was yesterday, when fascists marched on the Jewish entity in the East End of London, and all the local communities stood together saying, if you come for the Jews, you come for us all. And they pushed back on Oswald Mosley and his vicious anti-Jewish rhetoric. What is happening now, and as you would have seen through the play, the same placards, the same slogans, the same vernacular, the same images were being bandied around in the 1930s, long before Israel even existed. And so anti-Semitism is the oldest hatred. And while, of course, legitimate concern and care and vocalizing pain and wanting a better future for Palestinians and the end of the war in Gaza cannot be conflated and must never be mixed in with anti-Jewish vernacular. And that is what we have seen a rise of, and it has absolutely contributed to what happened the other day. And we are very, very fearful. And I have to say, Trevor, as ever, and you talk about the Merchant of Venice 1936, and we can look at other periods where Jew hatred has flourished. When Jew hatred is allowed to flourish in any society, Jews are the canary in the coal mine. Anti-Semitism starts with the Jews, but it doesn't end with the Jews. It is a sign of extremism, and it is a sign of a malaise and a sickness deep within that society. The past predicates the future.
Tracy-Ann, just before we finish, though, I'm going to put this question as carefully as I can. You know me well enough to know, I think, what I mean. Nobody can reasonably hold the Jewish community here responsible for the actions of the Israeli government. But it must be legitimate to ask supporters of Israel if the last 2 years, after 2 years on, they still back the decisions being made by the Israeli government.
Trevor, as a Jewish woman living in Britain, I do not have to answer that question. No Jew should have to pass a political purity test to find out whether there is a justification for them being murdered at their own synagogue. This is a nonsense and it is a false flag. The Jewish community live in this country. We live under these rules. We live under the laws of the land, and we want to be protected, and we want to feel that ourselves and our children can have a safe and valuable and worthwhile future. We do not have to answer political purity tests as to our feelings about Israel. What we all personally, individually feel, and I would say many of us that I know, and I think I speak for the majority of my community, we want that war to end. It's horrific on every side, but nobody has to pass a political purity test. And the conflation of the two in regard to that murder, that assassination, that terrorist attack at that synagogue feels wrong. And that's something that the government should start stamping out. No Jewish child going to school, no Jewish actress going into a rehearsal room, no Jew anywhere should have to pass a political purity test to find out whether they can be treated as a normal human being. Sorry, I feel really strongly about that.
Tracy Ann, thank you for your time today. I wish we were speaking under better circumstances, but thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me on.
And then this, including Tony Blair.
Demilitarize Gaza, and that's quickly. Decommission the military capabilities of Hamas and all other terror organizations. Do that immediately. And we're relying on the countries that I named and others to deal with Hamas. And I'm hearing that Hamas wants to get this done too, and that's a good thing. And destroy all terror infrastructure, including the tunnels, weapons, production facilities. They have a lot of production facilities that we're destroying. They'll also help train local police forces in the areas that we're discussing right now, in particular in and around Gaza, working with the new transitional authority in Gaza. All parties will agree on a timeline for Israeli forces to withdraw in phases. They'll be withdrawing in phases. No more shooting, hopefully. As progress is made toward achieving these goals, Arab and Muslim nations need to be allowed the chance to fulfill these commitments of dealing with Hamas. They have to deal with them because they were the one group that we have not dealt with. I haven't dealt with them. But the Arab countries are going to, and Muslim countries are going to be dealing with Hamas, and I believe they've already been there. I think they probably have an understanding, and they haven't maybe mentioned that, but I would imagine they do. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone as far as they've gone. If they're unable to do so, then Israel would have the absolute right, and actually our full backing, the U.S. full backing. Marco's here, and a lot of our leaders are here, our great Vice President, Susie Wiles, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner. They've been so involved in this process. I don't think anybody else could have done it or even come close, but it's we're right there. We're right there. First time in thousands of years, I think you can probably say, if you really look into it, if you study back, if you're a scholar, you would say thousands of years. Israel would have my full backing to finish the job of destroying the threat of Hamas. But I hope that we're going to have a deal for peace. And if Hamas rejects the deal, which is always possible, they're the only one left. Everyone else has accepted it. But I have a feeling that we're going to have a positive answer. But if not, as you know, Bibi, you'd have our full backing to do what you would have to do. Everyone understands that the ultimate result must be the elimination of any danger posed in the region. And the danger is caused by Hamas. The tyranny of terror has to end, and this is, again, something that we're looking for. This is eternity. This is for forever. To ensure the success of this effort, my plan calls for the creation of a new international oversight body, the Board of Peace, we call it, the Board of Peace, sort of a beautiful name, the Board of Peace, which will be headed, not at my request, believe me, I'm very busy, but we have to make sure this works. The leaders of the Arab world Israel, and everybody involved asked me to do this, so it would be headed by a gentleman known as President Donald J. Trump of the United States. That's what I want, is some extra work to do, but it's so important that I'm willing to do it. And we'll do it right, and we're going to put leaders from other countries on, and leaders that are very distinguished leaders. And we'll have a board, and one of the people that wants to be on the board is the UK former Prime Minister, Tony Blair. Good man, very good man. And some others. And they'll be named over the next few days. And it'll be quite the board. Working, everybody wants to be on it now. I don't know if that had anything to do. They named me and everybody else wanted to be on it. I guess they figure, well, he's a soft touch. He'll be easy to deal with. Working with the World Bank and others, it will be responsible for recruiting and training a new government that will be made up of Palestinians along with highly qualified experts from all around the world. Hamas and other terrorist factions will play no role in the board, but they'll play no role in the governance of Gaza at all, directly or indirectly. As you know, thousands of Hamas leaders have been killed and soldiers have been killed. And we can never forget October 7th, but thousands have paid the price for that. And now it's time to get our hostages back and get back to trying to build something that's really great and very important. In our meeting today, Prime Minister Netanyahu was very clear about his opposition to a Palestinian state. And he continuously mentions October 7th, and I understand that. Most people do. And I understand and respect his position on many things, but what he's doing today is so good for Israel. I noticed that they have large crowds gathering in Israel all the time, and they have my name up. They like me for whatever reason, Bibi, I don't know, but they do like me. But they say two things. Please get the hostages back, and please end the war. They've had it. It's had it. So I think it's a very popular thing you do, because he's a warrior. He doesn't know about getting back to a normal way of life, but he is a warrior, and Israel's lucky to have him. But now the people want to get back to peace. They want to get back to normalization in a true sense. Several countries have foolishly recognized the Palestinian state. As you know, some of our European friends, allies, good people, but they're really, I think, doing that because they're very tired of what's going on for so many decades. They've been presidents and prime ministers for years, and during this time, having to do with the Middle East, all they're doing is talking about the same thing over and over. They want to see it get back. And nobody wants that more than me, or I believe Bibi too. But the people of Israel want it. They really want it. They want the hostages back. That includes the probably 32 bodies that we're talking about, 20 people that are living, 32 or so people that are dead, and they want to have peace. So let us not forget how we got here. Hamas was elected by the Palestinian people. Israel withdrew from Gaza thinking they would live in peace. Remember that a long time ago? They withdrew. They said, you take it. This is our contribution to peace. But that didn't work out. That didn't work out. It was the opposite of peace. They pulled away. They let them have it. And I never forgot that, because I said, that doesn't sound like a good deal to me. As a real estate person, I mean, they gave up the ocean, right? Ron, they gave up the ocean. They said, who would do this deal? And it still didn't work out. They were very generous, actually. And they gave up the most magnificent piece of land in many ways in the Middle East. And they said, all we want to do now is have peace. And that request was not honored. Instead of building a better life for the Palestinians, Hamas diverted resources to build over 400 miles of tunnels and terror infrastructure, rocket production facilities, and hid their military command posts and launch sites in hospitals, schools, and mosques. So if you went after them, you'd be after them, and you wouldn't even realize you ended up knocking out a hospital or school or a mosque. That terrible thing. Terrible, terrible way to have to fight. No fight is good, but that's a real bad one. So there are many Palestinians who wish to live in peace. Many. I've seen so many of them, and they have support. And I challenge the Palestinians to take responsibility for their destiny, because that's what we're giving them. We're giving them responsibility for their destiny, fully condemn and prohibit terrorism and earn their way to a brighter future. They don't want the life that they've had. They've had a rough life with Hamas. If the Palestinian Authority does not complete the reforms that I laid out in my vision for peace in 2020, they'll have only themselves to blame. We're giving them an amazing footprint, and they have amazing support from the leaders of the Arab world and the Muslim world, the great leaders. These are great leaders. These are unbelievable leaders that have built great countries and very wealthy countries. What the future holds for the Palestinians, no one really knows, but the plan that we put forward today is focused on ending the war immediately, getting all of our hostages back, getting everything back. Hard to believe when you even say it, and creating conditions for durable Israeli security and Palestinian success. Israeli security is going to be involved. We're going to help you. We'll be there with you in terms of helping with security. We want to make sure it works. We just want to make sure it works. There shouldn't be a shot fired. Now, there will be, I guess, because that's the way it seems to be, but there shouldn't have to be within a few days. There shouldn't have to be a shot fired. And maybe for eternity. Wouldn't that be nice? I hope it's true. I can tell you the leadership of that region feels that there's a good chance of it being true. So this will lead to this agreement that we're talking about will lead to a sustainable long-term peace. No president in history has been a greater friend of the state of Israel than I have, in addition to negotiating the Abraham Accords. I like to say it that way because the real people, that's what they call Abraham. I would say Abraham, but it's so much nicer when you say Abraham. So much more elegant. But the Abraham Accords, they're amazing. Jared, you did that along with your group of geniuses, and nobody thought that could be done. We have 4 countries, and Sleepy Joe Biden didn't do a thing. He didn't even know what the hell they were. He should have had them fold up. But I think this will also lead to packing them. And who knows, maybe even Iran can get in there. I hope, we hope we're going to be able to get along with Iran. I think they're going to be open to it. I really believe that. But they could be a member. I long ago said, I'll bet you at some point Iran will be a member of the Accords. And little did I realize it was going to take this turn. That was some turn we did with the B-2s. But I think they might very well be there because it's a great thing for them economically. I recognize the eternal capital of Israel. I opened the American embassy in Jerusalem. That was something that everyone said would never be done, could never be done. Virtually every president for many, many years, for decades, would campaign on making Jerusalem the capital of Israel. They campaigned on it over and over. Is that right, Steve? Is that right? Everyone, and when they got to it, and I understand why now, because it was so, when I got to office, I campaigned on it too. I said, we're going to make it, and then I'd get calls from the leaders of various countries saying, please don't do it, please don't do it. It'll end the whole world, please don't do it. And finally, I just didn't say anything, and I did it. People were calling me before I did it because I heard I was going to do it, and leaders of countries were calling me, and I think it was on a Thursday that I did it, and they'd call me Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 3-4 times a day, and I said, tell them I'll call them back on Friday. And I announced it on Thursday, and I called them back, the biggest people in the world, and they said, you've done it. I said, done what? You've made the capital of Israel, Jerusalem, and we wanted to talk yet. I wish you called me a little sooner. Maybe I could have done something about it. So that was a lot easier than getting into an argument because I knew what they were calling about. And you know what? It turned out to be amazing. Everybody thought it was going to lead to the end of the world, right? The end of the world, Ron. That's what they said. It didn't lead to anything. It just led to something that I promised and something that was very, very popular for Jewish people and a lot of other people too. I recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, and I cut taxpayer funding to the corrupt United Nations Relief and Works Agency. And United Nations was interesting because, as you know, a few days ago they introduced me. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. I'm looking at my teleprompter, and the thing was dead, stone cold, dead. The thing's up here. I have a long, beautiful speech to make. I'm back 30 feet back, and I'm saying, they're introducing me. There's nothing on my teleprompter. So, but I made a speech. I actually got good marks. You think Biden could have done that? I don't think so. I don't think he could have done that. I don't think too many people could have done it. But actually, it was actually more of a speech from my heart, if you want to know the truth. I think it was maybe better in certain ways because it was from the heart. It has to be from the heart. Otherwise, you're in big trouble. But I cut taxpayer funding for that very corrupt United Nations Relief and Works Agency, and nobody thought that would be done, and withdrew from the horrible Iran nuclear deal that was imposed upon Israel by Barack Hussein Obama and Biden. And I don't think Biden knew anything about it, though. I don't think he knows anything about it now, actually, if you ask him. He'd say, what is that? And we obliterated Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity, making it impossible for them to have a nuclear weapon, which they would have had probably in about 2 months from that. But I've never asked Israel to compromise its security, but we had big, strong talk. Nobody's been better to Israel. No president's been better to Israel than Donald Trump. But we had a long, strong talk, Bibi and I, and he understands it's time. It's time. History has shown, and the people of Israel want it. And the people of the Middle East want it. The people of enemies of Israel want it, but they don't have really too many enemies right now. And you know what? Many countries have gained great respect for Israel, for the way they fight, for the job they do, including me. I had respect anyway, but they gained respect. History has shown us that those who have relations with Israel have thrived, while those who have devoted resources and attention toward the destruction and even annihilation of Israel have languished. They haven't done well. Israel is not going anywhere. They're going to coexist with other people and countries in the region, from Syria to Lebanon to Saudi Arabia. The promise of a new Middle East is so clearly within our reach. This is the closest we've ever come to real peace, not fake peace, not political fool's peace. If we can get this difficult problem solved, the opportunities for all within that vast region of this world, it's a vast region, it's unlimited. The Abraham Accords show that all countries are better off when they communicate and work together and embrace new opportunities. I hope Jared and Steve and Susie and Marco and JD, we have great people. I hope you guys are going to work very hard to get these other countries in, because now they have no excuse. There's no longer an excuse. They were somewhere hesitant. And I tell you, the 4 countries that went in, I give them tremendous credit, and it's worked out incredibly well for them. In the same spirit, I'm pleased to report that earlier today, we took another important step toward greater understanding of the region. A short time ago, we had a historic phone call in the Oval Office with Prime Minister Tani, who's really a great person. So we had a great talk, and I was on the phone, and Bibi was talking. Prime Minister Al Thani was of Qatar. They really had a heart-to-heart conversation. It was a great conversation, I thought. It was productive. It was everything that you need to have something turn out to be successful. And I want to thank Bibi, and I want to thank the Prime Minister. It was fantastic. We agreed to launch a formal trilateral mechanism between Israel, Qatar, and the United States to begin a dialogue to enhance mutual security, correct misperceptions, and avoid future misgivings. And I want to thank Qatar, its leadership, and the Emir. He's a fantastic person. I think, I'm going to be his public relations man, because I know him differently than a lot of people know him. But he wants peace. He wants to see peace. and its people, and they really acknowledge the critical role that they played as mediator. And again, we're not quite finished. We have to get Hamas, but I think they're going to be able to do that. So now it's time for Hamas to accept the terms of the plan that we've put forward today. And again, this is a different Hamas than we were dealing with, because I guess over 20,000 have been killed. Their leadership has been killed 3 times over. So you're really dealing with different people than we've been dealing with over the last 4 years, 5 years. Everyone has done their part and come to the table in good faith. Our Arab and Muslim partners are fully prepared to step up and fulfill their commitments for the benefit of the people of Gaza and the entire region. They're willing to step up and do a lot. They really are. There are a lot of good people involved. Everybody who wants to see an end to the violence and destruction should be united in calling for Hamas to accept the extremely fair proposal so that we can end the war and get us back our hostages right now and have everlasting peace. And I look forward to having relationships with everyone. As the chairman of the board, I'll be involved, and we'll have meetings with some very smart people that'll be working over there to make sure that we haven't just been wasting time with an agreement that doesn't get done. The task of building peace will not be easy. There are some of the hardest problems in the world to solve, and that's why it's been going on for so many centuries. But too many lives are at stake not to try, and this was more than a try. I mean, I think this is something that gets done when you have virtually every country, and these are powerful countries that have a lot of money, and the money can make things happen. A lot of countries try and they don't have any money. These are very rich countries that can make things happen. So together we'll forge a much safer and more hopeful future for everybody, including Israel. And I want to thank Prime Minister Netanyahu for his partnership, and I want to thank all of the leaders, the kings and the emirs and the presidents and prime ministers, people I mentioned. And they've been absolutely fantastic to work with, and it's just happened very quickly. It's happened from a couple of weeks before I had a couple of meetings, but a couple of weeks before we went to the United Nations, and we had some incredible meetings. It all came to place. It all took place, and everybody wanted to be a part of it. I don't have anybody that's saying we don't want anything to do with it. It's just the opposite. And I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, a year ago, I don't think we would have had this kind of participation, Mr. VP, right? I don't think we would have had. It's been amazing. The participation was 100%. Everybody wants to be a part of it. And everybody, those very strong countries, everybody wants it to work. So, Bibi, congratulations on this. I think this will be your crowning achievement, frankly. If this all works out, we think it will. It's going to be your crowning achievement. And I want to thank you very much for being here. Thank you, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. President, first I want to thank you for graciously hosting me once again in the White House. And second, I want to thank you for your friendship and for your leadership.
I think these two have the same speech right.
From Jerusalem to Tehran, from the Golan Heights to Gaza, you've proven time and again what I've said many times. You are the greatest friend that Israel has ever had in the White House. And Mr. President, you and I both know it's not even close. While you focus at home on making America great again, your leadership abroad is changing the world for the better, ending wars and advancing peace. I believe that today we're taking a critical step towards both ending the war in Gaza and setting the stage for dramatically advancing peace in the Middle East. And I think beyond the Middle East, in very important Muslim countries. I support your plan to end the war in Gaza, which achieves our war aims. It will bring back to Israel all our hostages, dismantle Hamas's military capabilities, end its political rule, and ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel. we would not have achieved this turning point without the courage and sacrifice of our incredibly brave soldiers. They fight like lions to defend the people of Israel, and they serve on the front line in the war between civilization and barbarism. Mr. President, when our two countries stand shoulder to shoulder, we achieve the impossible. Just a few months ago, in Operation Rising Lion and Operation Midnight Hammer, we struck a decisive blow against Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program. Your bold decision to send those B-2s made the region safer and the world safer. Now, under your leadership, we're taking the next step to win the war and expand the peace. Your plan is consistent with the 5 principles my government set for the end of the war and the day after Hamas. Everybody asks, what is your plan for the day after Hamas? Here's our plan. Passed it in the cabinet. All our hostages, both those who are alive and those who died, all of them will return home immediately. Hamas will be disarmed. Gaza will be demilitarized. Israel will retain security responsibility, including a security perimeter for the foreseeable future. And lastly, Gaza will have a peaceful civilian administration that is run neither by Hamas nor by the Palestinian Authority. If Hamas agrees to your plan, Mr. President, the first step will be a modest withdrawal, followed by the release of all our hostages within 72 hours. The next step will be the establishment of an international body charged with fully disarming Hamas and demilitarizing Gaza. I appreciate your willingness to lead the body, Mr. President. I really appreciate it because you have a lot of things to do, and this is important. And it reflects the confidence that this will give everyone, that things will be followed up on all the commitments made. The fact that you're taking this on, I think, helps a lot to make sure that everything flows in the direction that we want. Now, if this international body succeeds, we will have permanently ended the war. Israel will conduct further withdrawals linked to the extent of disarmament and demilitarization, but will remain in the security perimeter for the foreseeable future. I think we should understand that we're giving everybody a chance to have this done peacefully, something that will achieve all our war objectives without any further bloodshed. But if Hamas rejects your plan, Mr. President, or if they supposedly accept it and then basically do everything to counter it, then Israel will finish the job by itself. This can be done the easy way, or it can be done the hard way, but it will be done. We prefer the easy way, but it has to be done. All these goals must be achieved because we didn't fight this horrible fight, sacrifice the finest of our young men to have Hamas stay in Gaza and threaten us again and again and again with these horrific massacres. Mr. President, I was encouraged by your clear statement at the UN against the recognition of a Palestinian state. That would be an outcome that, after October 7th, would reward terrorism, undermine security, and endanger Israel's very existence. As for the Palestinian Authority, I appreciate your firm position.
Looking for Beijing. The 30. Well,
Welcome back. Now, in spite of tentative acceptance by Hamas for Trump's peace plan, Israel has continued to strike Gaza this morning. Let's get now the views of the Israeli government. We speak to the spokesperson, David Mencer, joining us from Tel Aviv. David, thank you very much for being with us this morning. We do appreciate it. Before we get to the situation in Gaza and a more wide discussion about the peace plan, I wonder if I can just speak to you about Thursday's attack. Removing the politics from it, David, to get a personal sense of your reflections following that attack on the synagogue in Manchester.
Good to be with you, Kamali. I'm speaking to you from the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem. I can tell you that there was a profound sense of shock in this country at that awful attempt, at that awful terrorist attack, and also the fact that, unfortunately, the Jewish worshippers were hit by police gunfire as well. That was also pretty shocking. But ultimately, the shock goes only up to a certain point, because these were attacks that Jews around the world, not least in the UK, expected. They are the result of the rhetoric of the government. And unfortunately, whether the government like it or not in the UK, the terrorists went to do the act thinking that they had the backing of the British government. Whether the government's intention was that or not, the terrorist did the act thinking he had the backing of the British government. He also probably thought that he had the backing of the BBC. He probably thought he had the backing of Sky News as well, because of this excessive demonization of Israel, which you guys have been engaged in for the last 2 years.
David, I really wish that we hadn't descended into an attack on the organisation or onto the BBC. I understand the point you're making, but you'll know that Sky News will reject that accusation. I'm sure the government will reject that accusation. I'm sure the BBC will as well. I do want to move on to the situation in Gaza, but just because of the comment there, the result of rhetoric, do you think that this individual felt like he had the backing of the UK government? I mean, David, David Mencer, you know the UK government, you know David Lammy personally. You don't seriously think, do you, that Sir Keir Starmer, David Lammy, Shabana Mahmood, anyone in this government or the previous government, through their actions, would give any kind of a justification for this individual's acts?
Kamali, I'll tell you how British Jews feel, and I can also tell you how Israel feels. Israel feels that weakness on behalf of the government, giving in to terrorist demands, calling for a Palestinian state directly as a result of the October 7th massacre, which Hamas themselves thanked the British government for. Hamas thanked the British government for that declaration. All of those actions mean that the terrorist, unfortunately, did his dastardly deed thinking, however misguided, thinking that he had the backing of the British government. Now, if you want to play a constructive role in this conflict, then the only constructive role to play is to call on Hamas to release our hostages now. You don't need a deal to do that. That just proves you're a human being. And for Hamas to lay down their arms, that would bring an end to this conflict in an instant.
And again, I'm sure the government will reject that point. But David, let's move on then to the situation in Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister overnight said all the hostages are close to being released. He said it hopes it will happen within the Feast of the Tabernacle. I understand that's up to the 13th of October. Bombing has continued overnight and this morning. Donald Trump had called for that to end. Will the bombing end?
Israel and the US are working side by side. You would have seen that partnership in play. I saw it with my own eyes at the White House just last week. The Prime Minister and the President are in extremely regular discussions, very regular contact, precisely because we want our hostages out straight away, all of them in one go, not in drips and drabs. 48 of them, unfortunately, are still there. 20 of them, we believe, are still alive. All of them need to be released. Now, when it comes to aspects of this deal, Israel will, of course, adhere to, and Israel is adhering to this deal. It is now all eyes on Hamas. Will this dastardly terrorist organization indeed go ahead and release our hostages? Will they indeed lay down their arms? Will they indeed provide some respite for their own people? Never mind the people of Israel, their own people who they have sacrificed in the most inhumane way.
David Menson, will the bombing stop then?
Israel will act completely within the confines of this deal. Israel has always accepted every negotiation process. So when there is a call for there to be a cessation of fire, for there to stop to be...
well, Donald Trump said exactly that a couple of days ago, didn't he?
So again, you're taking the line of Hamas, Kamali, which you've done consistently. I'll give you that. You are consistent,
David Menson,
Kamali.
That's not fair.
Yes, it is fair. Yes, it is fair. Yes, it is fair, Kamali. You have consistently taken the line of Hamas. Israel always.
In what regard have I taken the line of Hamas? I hope that you and I are going to have a constructive conversation today.
Yes, I'm happy to have a constructive
so don't accuse me of taking the line of a terror group.
Yes, well, that's exactly what you have done consistently. For the last 2 years,
Donald
you have
Trump
taken that
said
line.
Israel should
this
stop
is
the
not
bombing.
our first rodeo. We've had many conversations, and I've heard you repeat back to me Hamas rhetoric again and again. You can shake your hand if you want to. You, as a media, also bear some responsibility for the attacks on Jews.
I'm not going to allow you to do that.
Yes,
I'm not
you
going to allow you to do
can.
that,
Yes,
David
yes,
Menson. No,
yes,
we're
you
not.
can do what
Okay,
you want.
let's get some specifics, can we? Because you're attacking me for some reason when I'm trying to get some answers from you as a spokesperson for the Israeli government. So, strikes have continued. You're not telling me when those strikes will stop. Currently, the Israeli military covers about 80% of the enclave. The idea, I think, is to withdraw to about 15%. Now, both sides seem to be waiting for the other side to do something. Hamas haven't announced that they will disarm. Israel hasn't fully said that it will withdraw. As the democracy in the situation, is it incumbent upon Israel to withdraw and allow international actors to come in and ensure that the terror group disarm?
Kamali, the first aspect of this deal is the release of our hostages. Everything follows from that fact. It's as simple as that. It isn't complicated. The first aspect of this deal, which is why Israel's people are behind it and why Israel's government is behind it, is the release of all of our hostages. Once that happens, then the subsequent aspects of this agreement will come into place. Israel will always agree to act within the confines of the agreement, as we always have. As you rightly said, we are a democracy, and Israel will always act within the parts of that agreement. Unfortunately, Hamas, through their actions, have proved again and again that they are the terrorist organization. They've been true to their name. Whether the BBC or indeed you, Sky, call them a terrorist organization, they are a terrorist organization. The best thing that could happen right now is for our hostages to be released as quickly, as soon as possible, 20 alive, unfortunately the dead for a decent burial, to be returned home to Israel, and then every single other aspect of that 20-point plan can come into play.
Now, of course, there were huge protests yet again in Tel Aviv demanding the hostages be released. You'll know that Hamas on the other side are looking for Palestinian prisoners to be released. So are we clear as to who will be part of that release of Palestinian prisoners?
Kamali, I'm not going to discuss that, the details of that part of the deal. It is, let me give you, so I can answer all of your questions. Every single aspect of the deal that we've worked together with the Americans will be adhered to. We are talking about extremely painful exchanges. We're talking about the release of our innocent civilian hostages for murderers in our prisons. People that have committed murder, people that have been convicted of murder, or Hamas terrorists that we've captured during this conflict with the terrorist organization in Gaza. These are very, very difficult things for Israelis to handle, to deal with, to come to terms with. But we believe that a human life is the most important, is of course sacrosanct. So we want to bring all of our hostages home. And because of that fact, we are willing to release even murderers, people with blood on their hands, people that say that they wish to carry out attacks again and again and again.
Of course, women and children have also been held in Israeli jails as a result of this. Now, I just want to finish by asking you...
Kamali, perhaps you could share with me these... Kamali, perhaps you could share with these women and children you feel are in Israeli captivity. Israel is a democracy when we take actions, when there have been terrorist attacks carried out by children. Yes, it is possible. A 17-year-old is still considered a child, but still has carried out terrorist attacks. This is a democracy. So those throwaway remarks that we somehow lock up women and children, it's outrageous. It's a slur, and is part of the reason that Israel and Jews have been demonized in the UK because of those slurs.
I'm amazed that you're still suggesting that about me, David Mencer. But let me just ask you this final question. An Israeli minister, Amichai Chikli, has invited Tommy Robinson to Israel, calling him a courageous leader. Why is Tommy Robinson, a man who's been convicted in this country for incitement to racism and terrorism, being invited to Israel?
Well, whether Tommy Robinson comes to Israel or not, Tommy is part of British culture. I noted that he brought on the streets of the UK hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So this is really a question for the UK, how it deals with
someone within your government's inviting him, calling him courageous.
Well, anyone that stands up against Islamism, we believe
deputies call him a thug.
Yeah, and I represent the state of Israel, and anyone that stands up to fight Islamism, whether on the streets of the UK or on the streets of Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, we consider to be worth talking to, because Islamism, unfortunately, cannot be appeased, as unfortunately the government of Keir Starmer are in the process of doing. Islamism cannot be appeased. It must be stood up to.
David Mencer, that's all the time we have.
Thank you.
We are seeing plumes of smoke. Of course, it's not at the ferocity, the bombardment that we've seen over the course of the last couple of years, frankly, since October 7th, which intensified at different points. And the Gazan people were told to move from place to place, from the north down south, then from the south back up to central Gaza. A lot of people now hoping that the bombardment will end soon. The Israeli Security Cabinet is going to be meeting to sign this deal off and agree to the Palestinian prisoners being released as well. Some 2,000 Palestinian prisoners will be released as part of this deal. Lists have been handed between the two groups, but that will probably take place over the course of the next few days. We are expecting hostages to be released over the weekend. Donald Trump said perhaps on Monday, but there are reports it could be as early as Saturday. But of course, the people of Gaza hoping that the bombardment will end soon too. And we did see celebrations overnight in Gaza, in Hostage Square as well in Tel Aviv. Mark Stone has our first report.
We have Marco Rubio.
The first indication of what would quickly become dramatic developments. Susie Wiles, Trump's chief of staff, leaves a meeting in the White House, a whisper with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who then takes her seat near the president and scribbles on a notepad.
They're smart, but they're not smart enough.
He hands it to the president. It is an immediately iconic image. After days of speculation, the ceasefire deal previewed in a handwritten note visible just to the cameras. Very close, it says, underlined. Then, we need you to approve a Truth Social post soon so you can announce deal first. Just a few words, but they tell the story of this moment, that this is a moment President Trump wants to own, his deal.
Yeah, I was just given a note by the Secretary of State saying that we're very close to a deal in the Middle East, and they're going to need me pretty quickly.
The meeting concluded. Then it took a couple of hours, but the Truth Social post came. I'm very proud to announce that Israel and Hamas have both signed off on the first phase of our peace plan, it says. This means that all of the hostages will be released very soon, and Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed-upon line as the first step towards a strong, durable, and everlasting peace. All parties will be treated fairly. This is a great day for the Arab and Muslim world, Israel, all surrounding nations, and the United States of America, and we thank the mediators from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey who worked with us to make this historic and unprecedented event happen. Blessed are the peacemakers. The president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, both key players in the process, had only arrived at the negotiations in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, hours earlier. Their presence there, a sign of progress. And then emerged more images for the ages. Israeli, Arab and American negotiators in Sharm el-Sheikh celebrating together. Qatar's prime minister and an Israeli general, quite the shot. And celebrations too in Gaza.
Is this the moment? It's incredibly quiet outside. It's the middle of the night. People haven't heard yet, but also it's incredibly quiet from the skies. Come on!
And of course, among the hostage families in Israel and beyond.
Since you became a president.
In the United States, some family members with Trump's Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, and on the phone with the president.
Our home. Thank you so much. Blessed be the peacemakers.
God bless you, Mr. President. God bless America.
Thank you very much. You just take care of yourselves. The hostages will come back. They're all coming back on Monday.
In a statement on X, the Israeli Prime Minister wrote, "With the approval of the first phase of the plan, all our hostages will be brought home. This is a diplomatic success and a national and moral victory for the state of Israel," he said. The president is expected to travel to the region in the days ahead, probably to Israel to coincide with the hostages coming home. Quite the optics for the self-styled peacemaker president who can now maybe claim that tag, if it all holds.
We need to look into the details, Mark.
Speaking to Sky's Trump 100 podcast, the longtime advisor to the Palestine Liberation Organization reserved his optimism.
We still don't know what are the changes that were made in Sharm el-Sheikh. But if the details are based on what we already know, I think the first phase could perfectly work. The first phase spoke about a release of all the Israeli captives from Gaza and a release of Palestinian prisoners from the Israeli side, which is also an important point. Who are those people that are going to be released? What are the names? Will Marouane al-Barghouthi, for example, the most popular Palestinian politician, be released from Israeli jails or not? I mean, that would be extremely significant. But once again, I think it's still too early to make a big celebration or just to declare that the war is over.
An Israeli commentator, Nadav Eyal, was equally uneasy about the long-term success.
I'm cautiously pessimistic about what's going to happen there, but what we do see here is an involvement for the first time of Arab countries from across the region. Moderate Arab countries, not so moderate Arab countries, and they're going to be involved in what's going to happen in Gaza, in rebuilding Gaza. And this gives me hope because they have the legitimacy that Israel does not have to operate within Gaza.
But the region has woken up today with an unquestionable shift. After tens of thousands have died, compromise and agreement. Words so hard to find here for so long, they were found in Egypt overnight. Events over the days ahead will be pivotal. One man in the Oval Office is taking this as his moment. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
As President Trump prepares to head to the Middle East, I've been speaking to Hamas about their involvement in negotiations to end the conflict in Gaza. The senior Hamas official, Dr. Bassem Naim, told me he was satisfied that Mr. Trump's plan would achieve peace in Gaza, but he warned that although Hamas is prepared to step away from politics, it is not ready to disarm just yet. Have a listen.
I believe without the personal interference of President Trump, after giving Netanyahu the chances one after one to fulfill or to finish the job, and he failed at the end to finish the job according to his criteria, the so-called absolute victory, without the personal interference of President Trump. In this case, I don't think that it would happen to reach this end, the end of the war.
Just to be clear, that the Trump plan does say that Hamas will have no role in governing the future of Gaza. So you can confirm then that your role as Hamas is over?
Look, Yalda, and I have to be honest with you and with your audience, and I have always be very open and frank in answering questions. Yes, we are ready to hand over government. We are ready to be totally away from any government or governing body. But when it comes to Hamas as an entity, as a Palestinian liberation movement, I think no one can overcome or exclude Hamas. Yes, we are ready to leave the government for a Palestinian body, but we are still there on the ground.
There's also calls for Hamas to completely disarm itself. Is that something that Hamas is willing to do?
This has to be discussed with all other Palestinians about the future of our strategy to struggle for freedom and independence. No one can deny us the right to resist by all means, including armed resistance. We can offer any other modality like a Hudna or a ceasefire for 5, 6, 7, 10 years where arms are stand still. We can think with other Palestinian resistance movement, with Arabic countries, with Islamic countries, how to guarantee a period of 5, 10 years, a time, space to found the Palestinian state. But what we have said many times,
so just to be clear,
our
though,
weapons
Dr.
are going to be handed over only to the hands of a Palestinian state. And our fighters can be integrated into the Palestinian National Army. Before that, no one has the right to deny us the right to resist the occupation by all means.
Now you're saying you don't want to and you will not disarm.
If you ask it directly, yes, we are not going to be disarmed as long as we are not sure that this will lead by any other means to have an independent, self-sovereign state which is able to defend itself.
What about an interim political force made up of the likes of, and including the role of former British Prime Minister Tony Blair?
All Palestinians, not only in Hamas, not only in Gaza, have very bad and very negative image of him. I don't believe that he will be very welcomed or will be a very positive input in this case. This could be Balfour Declaration 2 after 100 years. We are reviving some very bad memories of UK and British mandate.
Dr. Bassem Naim speaking to me a little earlier. Well, let's bring in our International Affairs Editor, Dominic Waghorn, who joins me here live in Jerusalem. Dom, just bring us up to date with where we are, because it is quite an extraordinary moment when we think about a ceasefire coming into effect in Gaza, and then, of course, all the other complications around the edges.
Yeah, it has been an extraordinary week, and we just, I guess, take a step back and think where we are. And, you know, it has been a historic day, and the days ahead will be historic. This is a fundamentally critical turning point, potentially a crucial moment for the Middle East. But, you know, tonight we have in Gaza people able to sleep wherever they are. And, you know, that family, the Nawezi family, are typical. They are going to find, you know, the area where their house was and camp on it. And, you know, Mohammed Nawezi there was saying that it's going to be, you know, it's an amazing feeling for him. They're going back to where they lived before, and they're going to start their lives again. For the first night, they can do that, safe in the knowledge, at least for tonight, they're not at risk of Israeli airstrikes and being killed. And for Israelis, it's the first night when they do feel there's a genuine, realistic possibility of all their hostages being brought home in the coming hours and the coming days. But beyond that, there are so many unknowns, so many what-ifs, and there's a sense, really, this whole thing is being held together by just a huge amount of diplomatic pressure and willpower, not least and most of all from Donald Trump. He's managed to put so much pressure on the Israelis that they have agreed to a deal that Benjamin Netanyahu really cannot want and believe in, fundamentally. And he's got the Turks, the Qataris, the Gulf Arabs and the Egyptians to put pressure on Hamas. But as Aaron Etzion was saying, an hour or so ago, actually Netanyahu and Hamas have kind of a convergence of interests. Of it is in their interest to keep this war going, but they have a huge amount of pressure, meaning that for now at least they're prepared to go along with this agreement. But the only way it stays together is that pressure being maintained, not just in the coming days, but the weeks ahead as well.
Dom, thank you as always for all of your analysis there. So attention now turns to Monday, which is due to see the next phase of President Trump's peace plan and the arrival of President Trump in the Middle East. Let's go straight to our US correspondent, David Blevins. And David, we're expecting to hear from President Trump tonight, but so far today, he's been quiet on Gaza.
He has been unusually quiet, just a couple of Truth Social posts, one thanking the Russian President Vladimir Putin for acknowledging the peace deal in the Middle East, and then another, just in the last few minutes, escalating the trade war with China. He's accusing China of imposing export tariffs on anything involving rare earth minerals and slapping a 100% tariff on top of the 30% tariff they had agreed during recent compromise talks. So a fragile peace in the Middle East and a trade war in the Far East. Donald Trump has also been to the Walter Reed Military Clinic today for what the White House described as his routine annual checkup, even though he had been there just 6 months ago. He said nothing to reporters on departure or return. We've got no travel details yet from the White House either. We know he's been invited to address the Israeli parliament on Monday. We think he may meet with released hostages or at least their families. We understand he's been invited by the Egyptian president to visit the Sharm el-Sheikh too, where the negotiations took place. In fact, there's talk of a hastily arranged summit of world leaders there to discuss the future of Gaza. I have to say, back here at home, there's been a bipartisan welcome for the ceasefire. Democrats, though, at great lengths not to give Donald Trump too much credit for it until a couple of hours ago, when during a CBS interview he received high praise indeed from two former secretaries of state, Condoleezza Rice and, wait for it, Hillary Clinton. When Hillary Clinton is praising Donald Trump, you know something significant has happened in the Middle East.
Indeed.
Good morning, Alex.
Morning, Trevor.
What's the mood there?
Well, I think the mood here in Israel is people are kind of optimistic, hopeful. This has been, for Israelis and Israeli society, a nightmare couple of years. They now see this moment with the hostages being released as a moment of closure, when that nightmare can end for the families who are going to receive back the bodies of their loved ones. It will be a time to allow the grieving process to be completed. For obviously the living hostages, it will be a time for the families to reunite. But really, that is kind of one chapter when it comes to the Israeli part of the story. Obviously, there are two parts to this equation, the Palestinians as well, who've experienced enormous loss as a result of the bloodshed unleashed by October the 7th. But going back to the Israeli part, the other aspect of all of this now is there's going to be a kind of reckoning, really, for the government of Israel and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Two parts to that, really. The first bit, October the 7th, happened on his watch. This is a country which prides itself on its security, keeping its citizens safe. Why did that happen? Why was the Israeli military complacent? Why did it not see such a massacre coming? So big questions for him to answer on the security front. The second part of all of that is, how was the war prosecuted? Was it the right way to go about it? Absolute huge destruction in Gaza, but people here scratching their heads and asking the question, well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, you said the only way to get the hostages out was to negotiate with Hamas under fire. But by and large, all of those hostages that have come out, with the exception of a few, have come out as a result of mediation and diplomacy. Had this process have taken place earlier, is it not possible that more of the hostages could have come out alive? So on the Israeli side, there is that kind of big reckoning. Now, going back to the Palestinian side, I think many Palestinians, as the dust is settling, will see this as a massive disaster. Look at the state of Gaza. It has been completely obliterated. People, 90% of the buildings, 90% of the homes, according to the United Nations, have been destroyed. And we are watching those pictures. of Palestinians going back to their homes, or what's left of their homes. It's just kind of shades of grey, the concrete buildings there just destroyed in Gaza. And then, of course, there is the loss of life, nearly 70,000 people. That's according to the official figures from the Gaza-run health ministries. Some academics say the actual figures may be much higher. And then there's the injured, hundreds of thousands of people injured, desperately in need of medical treatment. So I think after the hostages are released, the deal is signed in Sharm el-Sheikh, all of the diplomats involved, Donald Trump has patted himself on the back. There'll be some kind of pretty dark moments of reflection.
The 20-point plan promoted by President Trump, of course, is what we need to be looking at post Monday, assuming that everything goes according to the script between now and tomorrow evening. There's quite a lot of air, a lot of flexibility, let's put it that way, in that 20-point plan. How optimistic are people that it's going to be sustainable?
Well, I mean, that really is the kind of billion-dollar question. I mean, nobody really knows whether this will be just a pause in the fighting or a long ceasefire where the conflict continues to be managed as it has been for decades, with breakouts of bloodshed, or whether or not we're heading to a more comprehensive peace. I think the lack of detail, the vagueness within the Trump peace plan, that's quite deliberately by the people who've drafted. It allows the negotiators to remain nimble, light on their feet, to kind of box and cox, move around and change things, and it gives them a bit of flexibility. But it's also, in some senses, a drawback as well. Nothing is actually pinned down. Now, the best way to look at that 20-point peace plan is kind of divide it into two parts. The first is about getting a ceasefire, getting that across the line, getting the hostages back, stopping the fighting, and getting huge amounts of aid into Gaza. The second bit is much, much more difficult and has bedeviled diplomats for decades, trying to end the world's most intractable conflict. That will be extraordinarily difficult. And there will be, on both sides, individuals and actors who will want to spoil that party. They won't want it to happen for various reasons, because they have vested interests in it not happening. But I think, certainly there appears to be momentum. We will watch very closely what unfolds in Sharm el-Sheikh. Donald Trump is due to arrive there after he's arrived in Israel, met hostages' families, addressed the Knesset. But I think there is certainly momentum to try and drive this further than being just a ceasefire, and try and come up with a more comprehensive peace settlement.
Alex, thank you so much. No doubt we'll be hearing from you during the day. Thanks for your time this morning.